Hi, I'm Nawaldine and I'm from SILT. Today we have Professor Jenny Whittal and Melissa
Akoue Mve.
Akoue Mve. Sorry, I'm trying to get the surname right, but we're here today because we are doing a series on AI in teaching and learning, and Jenny is from the Geomatics, and so our discussion today is really discipline specific around the integration of AI. Jenny, can you tell me about, just in general, what you teach for those people that don't know geomatics, and then also how you came about integrating AI into your teaching?
Okay, yes, I'm a professional land surveyor and I teach in the Division of Geomatics. And so the courses I teach are the introductory courses to first years and then mainly third year courses, particularly land law and cadastral surveying, and also some advanced technical surveying subjects, which we're not that concerned about AI in those, but it's more the land and cadastral survey law that it becomes important.
Okay. And then Melissa, for you, I know that you're a postgraduate student at the moment doing your master's, but you're also in the industry.
Yes, I'm a professional land surveyor. I work for National Geospatial Information, which is a government institution, and we oversee aerial photography and mapping for the country.
So both of you, it tends to feel to me that AI would work very well in your fields, but Jenny, from a sort of UCT professor level as well as teaching in 2023, when all of this got disrupted, what was your thoughts about AI prior to the ChatGPT as soon as it broke? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, so we've used AI quite a bit with things like machine learning and so on. It's absolutely embedded as part of our technical processes. So our initial forays into AI, I think, have been positive and helpful. But I think with the invention of the ChatGPT type of AI, it's become more difficult to ascertain how we cope with it in the teaching environment. I think in the professional environment, people are using it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But in the teaching environment, it goes back to, what are you trying to teach your students? What are your learning outcomes? And how does AI integrate? How can you integrate that with the AI world that we face now?
Yeah. So did you think about, oh goodness, I'm seeing this happening. What should I do to pivot my teaching? Was that quite a very quick response for you as opposed to just thinking,
yes,
what did you sense? Were you nervous? Scared? Were you worried?
I would say last year I was nervous and worried what was going to happen, because I couldn't really see it being used a lot, maybe now and again, but it wasn't mainstream from what I could see. But this year, definitely, it's mainstream. So as I've been teaching my land law course, I've actually looked at every assignment that I've done and realized, gosh, there's a lot of AI coming in here, and you can't police it, and I don't think one should. So what I've done is already redrafted my assignments for next year. So as I marked the assignment, I thought, okay, that hasn't worked. How can I modify this assignment? So for instance, I've taken an assignment. The first assignment is how to use the law library. And if students are subverting the aim of the assignment and not using the law library, but somehow getting there by any other means, which can include AI, then clearly there's no point in the assignment because the learning outcomes are not being reached. So then what I've done is, and I'm not sure if it's the best approach or the only approach, but I've restructured the assignment so the questions are slightly different, and also I want them to embed screenshots of them finding things using the law library resources such as LexisNexis. So I want to see a screenshot of them actually accessing the document so that I know, what is my teaching outcome? It's that they know how to use LexisNexis or DutaStat or any of those others. So I've embedded, they must upload screenshots of them doing it. So that's my initial response. So I've looked at all the assignments up to this point that will be delivered next year, and I've redesigned them. But I think we must move away from this idea that students are out there to subvert the system and so on. Way back when I first started teaching here, before all of this, Google was new, and are students going to need university because now there's Google, and students will be strategic, and we shouldn't expect them to be anything less. Don't we want students to be strategic? And if being strategic means they use AI just as we would use it in the professional setting, strategically, we must expect students to do that. And then I think we need to provide some guidance as to how they can use it strategically while still gaining the learning outcomes of the course and graduate outcomes of the degree that we have a contract to deliver on.
Yeah.
So Melissa, just responding to what Jenny's saying, how in the industry would you say is a loss if Jenny said to them, okay, I'm not going to change my assessment.
Yeah.
I'm going to let them use AI.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get screenshots from the LexisNexis library.
Yeah.
Because there's a fine line between what Jenny is saying and what is required in the industry. How can you sort of unpack that for us?
Yeah. Well, it's actually interesting because I'm busy teaching some of the geomatics students at the moment. They do their VAC work in our department. So we've been having this conversation, and I think I've been iterating the point that we use it in industry. We use it for the basic things if you're sending email and that, but industry specific, in geomatics, I do a lot of scripting, coding. You'd spend hours looking for a comma in the wrong place. You know, nowadays you can just ask it to help you find the errors. Does that mean you'll never have to code again? Absolutely not. You still need to understand how Python works and how VBA works and everything. But if students come in there and they're like, AI is bad, I can't touch it, then you end up wasting a lot of hours. It's really about efficiency. And I think in the land law perspective, if we're in a situation, and we had a situation a few days ago where the students did something and I'm like, you're not supposed to do that legally. We're expecting them to know where to go and find that information. And so LexisNexis, they need to know that they need to go there and what legislation they're looking for. They need to know what to prompt.
Yeah.
You know, how to actually interact with the chats in a way that will generate meaningful results, and then how to verify it afterwards and make sure that they're not quoting something that is maybe from a piece of legislation that has been amended. I've found this frequently when I've used ChatGPT or Gemini to quote a particular piece of legislation. It's actually quoted from something that's been amended already. It hasn't quoted the most recent regulation or section. So
I mean, what you're both talking about is the foundational knowledge that they really need on like how to find finding the legitimate knowledge, right? And then using AI in an expert way when they need rudimental stuff that's just doesn't require the headspace. So then you can work on the efficiency. But Jenny, for you to have gotten to the point where you're actually thinking about redesigning your assessments, like how difficult was that? Because we get that quite a bit, you know. We've launched we've endorsed the AI framework in education, and one of the key principles is to look at redesigning assessment and learning outcomes. But we have a lot of our lecturers just saying like that's a lot of work. It's also connected to the accreditation, SACWA, you know, CHE. So there's complexity in that, in the rubrics, in the way in which they've already designed it. And to some extent, some of the faculties definitely, if they've decided to do invigilated exams, great to them, we can understand that. But at your just like understanding as a lecturer, was it a lot of work? And why did you feel like that work was worth this process as opposed to sticking to your lane? You know, go to the library, do it like this, give me a screenshot, I'm not interested.
I think if we look back on the uncertainty that we faced here at UCT, we're looking at fees must fall and so on, we're looking at COVID, we're looking at UCT5. The thing that has struck me most often is that what I dislike the most is uncertainty. You know, I can handle difficulty, but I do not like uncertainty. And
COVID must have really thrown you for
but if you think about from the student perspective, they also don't like uncertainty, not knowing what is the directive, what is the lecturer going to do. Then how are they operating? They're operating in fear, and we don't learn in an environment of fear. So I think that's, to me, the driver of, you know, rather explode the problem and let the pieces land on the floor and then look at them as you pick them up and see what sense you can make of it. Don't ignore it and close the cupboard door and not look at the problem. So to me, it's rather a point that the point is to, I mean, we're not going to do it right the first time, and you're going to redesign and then have to redesign. But that's the modern world. Nothing is ever finished. So I think we're learning at the same time as the students. I think that's the difficulty. So we're going to make mistakes, and what interventions we put in place may not work or may not work fully. But we have to do something, and I think we have to open up the conversation. So what I've done with my assignments now also is have a whole extra sort of almost a page, what is generative AI, what is different types of AI, here's the UCT AI policy, you need to read it as a student, as we have to read it as staff, that's your contract, you need to read about that. And then how can I use AI in this assignment? Not all assignments, because each assignment is different. How am I allowed to use AI in this assignment, and how am I not allowed to use it? So that's explicit. So we're not leaving students in the dark, unknown and operating out of fear. And then there's also a statement, sort of an extended plagiarism statement. Okay, I've used AI. How have I used it? So I used this, and at what stage of the assignment? Was it to review my result, my writing, so that it's written in good English? Everyone wants to write in good English, and many students can't, and they have that imposter syndrome, and rightly so. So if they're using it strategically, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, this year I had already amended my second assignment by the time it was running this year. So I saw the impact of that information. And yes, some of them I think did use generative AI, whereas I specified they shouldn't. Why? Because I can see the quality of the English is more than what it would normally be. But then, you can't punish someone for that, really. We've got a situation where the second and third assignments are things where they've got to read law, so they've got to read statutes, which are very difficult for someone who's even English speaking. It's very difficult. They've got to read judgments from cases. Those are very difficult for people to read. So read the judgment, read the law, but maybe also get it to unpack it for you so that you have a better understanding.
And I can just say, with Jenny being my supervisor, as when I started my master's, AI was still this not so sure about it, and now it's just exploded. And throughout that process, we've always chatted about it. I remember it first came up when I was doing interviews, and I was saying, okay, there's this application that I can use to take notes, and it will do the transcribing, and it will do this. And she's very interested. Oh, that's great. Let me try and see, let me know how it goes. And now, even in our postgraduate meetings, we all talk about it, and we'll say, I used this application, this worked, this didn't, this is not ethical. And we have those conversations. And at each step of the way, I've said, Jenny, this is the way I've used AI. Do you think this is still okay? So I think that's what Jenny was talking about now, where there's this fear that just blanket no, then I can't do this. But actually, I found it to be very useful when you use it in an ethical way.
Yeah, I mean, Melissa's really led the way in terms of using AI to do coding of her interviews and so on for her masters.
I was just going to ask that. Did you find that the validity is still on point? Because it's almost like we want to say to you, like, when I did my coding, I did it on a spreadsheet.
Ooh.
I did it manually, and it's like, now it's like, how can you get that hack? It can't be the quality of the human nuance that I had to slog for. So how can you get to use that, like, Melissa? It's not there. So I just wanted to know, like, in terms of your assessment of feeling like the coding is still legitimate and it's not taking away from your knowledge on what is the rigor of your study and your interviews.
So when I first started doing it, I did one section on NVivo. A couple of my interviews I did on NVivo, did the coding manually, everything.
Put in your time.
I put in my time, and then there's this auto coding function that NVivo has. So I tested that. It was nice for some very obvious coding things. I then took the other section, which I hadn't done manually, and I plugged it into a paid version of ChatGPT, and I saw what it generated, and I used that, and then I said, okay, now I'm going to compare it. I'm going to now read it, and I'm going to now do it manually. And what I found from my experience was it didn't generate rich enough codes on its own. They were great guides. In fact, I used it to generate an initial coding structure in NVivo. which that was great. But as I was coding, I was like, oh, I need to tweak this. I need to change this. This is actually not correct. But in the end, what I found was the best. You can't get away from reading the information. You can't get away from physically doing it.
And also critiquing it.
And
like
critiquing
you have to be able to pull the sense of it
Yeah.
from yourself and then like almost refine it. So I mean, what you're saying is what at every level of learning, if across the board you're saying use AI in an enabled way where it can surface things that isn't necessarily what you need to learn to do, like
Yes.
coding everything from scratch.
Exactly.
But in terms of like just surfacing things that you can
Yes.
then have a better specialist lens on it,
Yeah.
makes more sense.
Yeah.
Then, like Jenny, to your point, if you had to think about, and I mean, I know that you wrote up some guidelines. Why did you do that? Like, why did you write up guidelines, and what did you hope to get from it?
So I wrote up guidelines in order to facilitate my communication with the students in each assignment. So I'm embedding those guidelines in each assignment and maybe tweaking them for that particular assignment.
So it's outward facing guidelines for the student to say, okay, this is what the
This is my
declaration is. This
expectations.
is your plagiarism. This is how you'd use AI. This is the glossary. So it was very much a student-driven guideline approach, so that they know what Prof. Whittal is saying to them. They know what
Yes.
you expect. So there was
Yes.
no like secret, maybe she'll do this, maybe she. It was really much your declaration of saying to them what your position is for
Yeah.
each of the assignments.
And I think also motivating it. I think it's important before you go into how and why and when is to motivate why you're having this conversation. And I think we must remember our position in Africa. For us all around this table, we're all women. African women are underrepresented in data. You know, where we are moving towards diversity and inclusion, I think AI is funneling us into the white Western male.
Yeah, homogeny.
Yes,
to that.
And I think we if we're going to embark on that, and the students as well, then do it knowingly, and that's not a route I want to take. So I think to keep our minds broad and to keep UCT maintaining its critical place in the world, and our graduates maintaining their critique, you can use AI, sure, but you must remember who you are. And the data is not supporting who we are. Here in South Africa, as women, it's not supporting who we are. So one needs to have that overarching level of critique. And also the ethics. You know, what are we doing from an ethical perspective in terms of, especially for postgraduate students, the ethics is very important. And for the undergrads to learn that as well. They need to learn about the ethics of what they're doing. Hence the sort of plagiarism statement is almost seen as a stick, really, but it's not that. It's your ethical contract of what have you done. Are you being honest about what you've done?
So I mean, we've come up against this quite a bit, that the power dynamic is really breaking down, the disruption of the power dynamic of knowledge from a professor or lecturer, you know, from a teacher to the student, that AI comes in and says, well, if I can find what you are teaching me on my phone or on this AI, and I can then critique what you are doing, there's this sense of discomfort of what does it mean to teach and learn, and how are students either giving the agency to understand their own pathways, their own learning pathways. So do you think we are like providing a lens for our students, that we're giving them a deficit by saying to them, you should be doing this for AI, rather than co-creating? Why, to Jenny's point, why we're telling them in some cases you use AI and in others? I mean, are students, in your feedback with students, are students having this debate about whether or not they want to almost fight for using AI? Are they coming back at you saying, but what about the industry? I won't have the competencies. What are your students saying to you?
Exactly that. The same group of students that are now doing VAC work with us. Right at the beginning, I said, are you guys aware of Geo AI? And what are your thoughts? And they said, we're not sure, but it feels like we should be nervous of our careers. And I said, absolutely not. it's a power tool. Take it and use it and learn how to use it efficiently. And I think they feed
When
off.
they said nervous about their careers, as in it's going to take over their careers, they're going to lose jobs?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a very common.
They were very
thing.
nervous.
All going to be replaced by AI.
Yes. And then today they're busy doing a report for me. It's a survey report. And I said, I know you're going to use AI to do it, because I'm not going to check it at a university level. But I said, you need to check that report and you need to make sure that these features are there and that it represents what happened in the field, because that is something that only you can do. That is your thing. You can explain what challenges you had and how that affected the results. AI is not going to be able to do that for you. So I think because I'm mentoring them, maybe they feel like they have to give me the predetermined, okay, no, we're not going to use AI, don't worry, ma'am. But when I have opened the conversations with them, the types of responses I've gotten is fearful jobs, it's not ethical, we're not allowed to do it, it's bad. And it might just be because they feel like that's what they've got to tell me. But when I opened it up and said I use AI every day, none of them felt free to engage in that conversation with me, which I thought was maybe, look, they could be shy. We were also talking about this earlier, where a lot of the younger generation, because of the dependence on technology, are limited in their social skills.
Yeah.
So they maybe don't know how to engage in those conversations. So I can't speak to what they might be thinking, but what they're verbalizing to me is that we're nervous of this thing and we don't know how to use it properly.
Yeah, I think it's unearthing the demonization of it and the shame, and saying like it's wrong in this because you're being assessed. And if you're being assessed by what you think a tool is producing, the nuance of that is not being explained to them.
Yeah.
But Jenny, on your side, like what would you say to lecturers who are just saying, I'm not interested in the communication, this is how we're doing it, this is specific for our discipline, and actually redesigning my assessments like you've done you're checking it and then redesigning it. It's just too much work.
What I'd like to take a step back before answering that and just respond to your previous discussion around the knowledge and the power of knowledge. And I've just been reflecting on when I was at university. It was pre-internet. And if you wanted information, it was direct from the professor in the lecture room, or it was go to the library or the notes. Those were your three sources of information: books in the library, your notes, or the lecturer themselves. So in that sense, the lecturer had a huge amount of power. The books were difficult to understand, so the notes would have been easier, but it was the notes and the lecturer. So they held the knowledge and they gave it to you in a drip or force feed or something godlike approach. But that's not, AI hasn't changed that. That's been changed for decades now. We are no longer the holders of knowledge. We do hold knowledge, but we're not the only way the student can access knowledge. And we don't sort of feed it out in drips and drabs to the student as we see fit. They have access to the knowledge without us. We're curators of their knowledge journey. So we curate how they access that knowledge, in what order they access it, and we facilitate their learning. That's all we do. They can find everything I teach somewhere else. And maybe even better, dare I say that, but they can find it somewhere else. But they're not getting the human interaction. They're not getting the explanation. They're not getting the force of the care, the performance that you have in front of class.
And maybe just to add, at least the lecturer can kind of narrow it down. There's so much information out there, you don't know what to learn, whereas you're bringing it.
So I think that
for me,
feeds
it's
to
also like the Afrocentric approach in terms of the diversity. What you're really doing is allowing them to experience the knowledge within their own context, recognizing their validity to add to that knowledge. Because even back in your day, I'm sure it was very westernized, European focus.
Very male in EBE,
And
I can
male,
tell
yeah.
you. Very male.
So, I mean, you curating it at a level of how do you bring in these voices and diversity in their experience and even in field work, you know, what are they bringing back from the field, from their context? And that is massively important in moving us away from this idea that, yes, we no longer hold the knowledge, but curating it so that it has a social justice lens. So that it has a lens beyond just we giving you a degree in geomatics, you can go and get this job. Really, what are your change makers that's going into Africa, South Africa, and as women, you know, from backgrounds that would never have gotten this opportunity within a department like yours, you know, and jobs like this. So it's so much more deeper, and I feel like positive, as opposed to just saying, oh, they just, you know, copy pasting, they're going to all be this generation that's going to be, you know, incompetent. There's so much more of an opportunity in the way in which we can lift them up from that granular, let's punish you through learning, let's actually support you learning in a more specialized, more efficient, more deeper way. And so that shift, I feel like those conversations are not happening on the why.
So I think that goes to your second question of should lecturers embark on this process of looking at each assignment. And I think if we don't, at our peril and at the students' peril and at the peril of the degrees that they come out with, because they won't be getting the learning outcomes of each assignment, and therefore they won't be getting the learning outcomes of the course or the degree. So as a public institution, I don't think that is that's not conscionable to produce people that are not that are not who we say they are. It's part of our ethical approach as well, our ethical mandate as educators. So I think we have to look at it, and I think people are tired. You know, we had COVID, and people are tired of change, but we can't afford to be tired of change. So I think the thing is it's like I say to the students, often for my thesis students at undergrad and postgraduate level, I say you overcome fear through action. So it's the Nike, you know, just do it. If you just do it and you just make a start, it becomes easier. So if you just make a start with one assignment that you find maybe is the most problematic one, you'll find maybe it's easier than what you think. And if you leave it, it becomes more of an elephant in the room, and your own fear of it becomes elevated to the point where maybe you are frozen and not able to act. So
Melissa, just to end off with you, takeaway message.
I think if you use it unethically, if you use these chatbots and AI and generative, if you use it unethically, it will come back to bite you in the end. I can tell you this from my own experience. I used it not unethically, but I used it as a shortcut. And then later on, I realized, not in my studies, Jenny, I didn't do my
supervisor's right here.
No, it was actually at work. I was using it to try and create something, and I didn't want to learn about something. So I'm like, I'm sure I can just use this as it is. And later on, I had a big problem with the program, and I had to go back and learn how to do it anyway. So, and I think it's the same in your studies. If you're going to use it to shortcut and do all your assignments for you, it's going to come back to bite you later anyway, and you might have to repeat some stuff because you don't have the fundamental understanding. So, I think it is something that people have to learn how to do, and it will be revealed eventually if you're not doing it properly.